It was supposed to be a rescue. A fairy tale written in the gleaming towers of Dubai, where dreams came true and desperate prayers were answered by men in white robes and endless wealth. Instead, it became a horror story written in blood and buried in sand. A story about 7 women who thought they'd found salvation, and 1 woman brave enough to expose the truth. A truth that would cost her everything. November 15, 2023. Dawn breaks over the desert outside Align, painting the sand in shades of gold and crimson. A construction worker arriving early to beat the heat notices something wrong. Tire tracks leading into the wasteland. Disturbed earth. The glint of purple fabric half buried in sand. He calls the police, his voice shaking into the phone. What they find will shock the entire United Arab Emirates and send ripples across the globe. The body of a young Filipina woman, her skull crushed, her dreams scattered like the sand that tried to hide her. Her name was Carla. She was 29 years old, and she died because she discovered a secret that 7 other women were living. A secret about a man who collected wives like possessions and discarded them when they became inconvenient. How does a marriage proposal turn into a murder scene? How does trust become a death sentence? How does a fairy tale become a nightmare? Stay with us, because this story will change everything you think you know about exploitation, desperation, and the deadly consequences of speaking out. Carla was born on March 8, 1994 in Cebu City, Philippines, in a neighborhood where dreams were luxuries most families couldn't afford. Her father Roberto drove a jeepney, weaving through traffic 12 hours a day to earn 300 pesos. Her mother Elena sold vegetables in the carbon market, standing in the heat from dawn until her feet swelled and her voice went hoarse from haggling. They had 4 children crammed into a 2-room concrete house with a corrugated metal roof that turned their home into an oven during summer and a drum during monsoon season. But poverty wasn't the defining feature of Carla's childhood. Love was. Her parents never let their children feel poor, even when they were rationing rice to make it last the week. Even when Roberto came home with empty pockets because a passenger had run off without paying. Even when Elena sold her gold earrings, the only inheritance from her own mother, to pay for school supplies. Carla watched her parents sacrifice everything, and she made herself a promise that would shape every decision she'd ever make, right up to the moment that decision killed her. "I will never let my family struggle like this again," she wrote in her diary at age 12. The year her father had his first heart attack. She watched her mother beg relatives for money to cover the hospital bill. Watched her father cry with shame at being unable to work for 3 months. Watched her siblings go to bed hungry because there wasn't enough for everyone. That trauma planted a seed in Carla's mind. A seed that grew into an obsession with providing, with rescuing, with being the hero her family desperately needed. She became the perfect student, studying by candlelight during brownouts, walking 2 kilometers to school to save jeepney fare, graduating valedictorian from a public high school where most kids dropped out by 10th grade. She won a scholarship to Cebu Doctors University College of Nursing, and while other students were going to parties and dating and living the college life, Carla worked 3 jobs. Fast food on weekdays, tutoring on evenings, market vendor on weekends. Her mother would beg her to rest, to sleep more than 4 hours a night, to take care of herself. But Carla couldn't stop. Every peso she earned meant 1 less burden on her parents. Every A on her transcript meant she was closer to the dream of becoming a nurse, the dream of working abroad, the dream of saving everyone. She passed her nursing board exam on the first attempt in 2015, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. She got a job at Vicente Sotto Memorial Medical Center, the biggest hospital in Cebu. She was making 15,000 pesos a month, almost $300. By Philippine standards, that was a decent salary. By reality standards, it was barely enough to cover rent and send money home to her parents and pay her youngest brother's school fees. And then, in 2017, everything changed. Her father was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. The treatment would cost 2 million pesos, $36,000. More money than her family would earn in 20 years. That's when Carla realized the truth. No matter how hard she worked in the Philippines, no matter how many shifts she took or how many patients she cared for, She would never earn enough to save her father. So she did what 240,000 Filipinos do every year. She applied to work in the Middle East, where nurses earned 5 times what they made at home, where the wealthy needed caregivers and the desperate needed opportunities. She got offers from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. She chose Dubai because everyone said Filipinos were treated better there. Everyone said it was safer, more modern, more tolerant. Everyone lied. October 2018. Carla landed at Dubai International Airport, her suitcase stuffed with everything she owned, her heart full of hope and fear in equal measure. The city shocked her. Buildings so tall they disappeared into clouds. Cars that cost more than her entire neighborhood. Shopping malls with indoor ski slopes and gold vending machines. This was a different planet. This was where fairy tales came true, or so she thought. The recruitment agency picked her up and drove her to Sonipur, a labor camp on the outskirts of the city where the people who built Dubai's fairy tales actually lived. 8 women sharing one room. 1 bathroom for 30 people. 40-degree heat and no air conditioning. Her first night, Carla cried herself to sleep, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. But in the morning, she remembered her father's face, remembered why she came, wiped her tears and reported for her first assignment. She was placed with Sheikh Amira, a 78-year-old Emirati widow who lived in a massive villa in Al Bursha. The house had 8 bedrooms, floors made of Italian marble, and more bathrooms than Carla's neighborhood had homes. Sheikh Amira was kind in the way wealthy people often are to those who serve them well, generous with compliments and modest bonuses, treating Carla less like an employee and more like a favorite pet. Carla didn't mind. The job paid 4,500 dirhams a month, about $1,200. Finally, she could send real money home. Finally, her father could start chemotherapy. For 3 years, life found a rhythm. Carla woke at 6 every morning to check Sheikh Amira's blood pressure and administer medications. She spent her days reading to the old woman, managing her appointments, coordinating with doctors and physical therapists. She lived in a small room behind the main villa, clean and comfortable but undeniably separate from the family she served. 1 day off per week, usually Friday. She'd attend Mass at St. Mary's Catholic Church where hundreds of Filipino workers gathered to pray and gossip and feel less alone. Then she'd video call her family, watching her father's face on a phone screen, seeing the cancer treatments slowly working, feeling like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. She barely noticed him at first. Sheikh Talal Rumi, Sheikh Amira's nephew, 51 years old, visiting his aunt once or twice a month with expensive gifts and practiced charm. He was just another face in the parade of relatives who came and went from the villa. Just another wealthy man in a city full of them. Carla was polite when she served him tea, professional when he asked about his aunt's health, invisible in the way domestic workers learn to be. She had no idea she'd already caught his attention, had no idea he was studying her, evaluating her, recognizing in her desperation the perfect victim for his twisted game. April 2022. Talal started visiting more frequently. Twice a week now, sometimes 3 times. Always bringing gifts for the staff, chocolates and perfumes and small kindnesses that made everyone smile. He started asking about Carla specifically. How was she doing? Was his aunt treating her well? Did she need anything? Sheikh Amira noticed her nephew's interest and teased him about it over dinner. "You ask about her more than you ask about me," she said, laughing. Talal smiled that practiced smile and said nothing. Then one afternoon, during tea service, he asked Carla a personal question. "Do you have family in the Philippines?" She hesitated, unsure if she should answer. But his face was kind and Sheikh Amira nodded encouragingly. So Carla told him about her father's cancer, told him about the treatment costs that kept her awake at night, told him about the constant worry that even with her salary, it might not be enough. Talal listened with an expression of deep sympathy, and when she finished, he reached into his wallet and pulled out 5,000 dirhams. "For your father's treatment," he said. "Consider it a bonus for taking such excellent care of my aunt." Carla stared at the money, more than a month's salary handed to her like it meant nothing. She tried to refuse, but he insisted. closing her fingers around the bills. "Family is everything in our culture," he said. "Your dedication to your father is admirable. Please, take it." That night, Carla called her sister Jen and told her what happened, her voice full of disbelief and gratitude. Jen, older and more cynical, warned her to be careful. "Rich men don't give money for free," she said. But Carla wanted to believe in kindness, wanted to believe that good things could happen to good people, wanted to believe in fairy tales. The visits continued. Talal brought her medical journals about cancer treatment, offered to connect her father with better doctors, asked about her dreams beyond being a nurse forever. He shared stories about his own life, how his first wife had died, how his children were grown and distant, how lonely success could be. He made her laugh, made her feel seen, made her feel like she mattered as a person, not just a servant. And slowly, carefully, he planted the idea that maybe there could be something more between them, the idea that maybe he could save her the way she was trying to save everyone else. June 2022. Talal asked Carla to meet him at a coffee shop on her day off. She knew she shouldn't go, knew it crossed every professional boundary, but he'd been so kind to her, so generous with her family. How could she refuse? They sat in a corner booth and he ordered her favorite drink, iced vanilla latte, something she'd mentioned once in passing weeks ago. He remembered. That detail mattered to her, made her feel special. "I've been thinking about you constantly," he began, and Carla's heart started racing. "You're different from other women. You have dignity, education, grace. You care about your family in a way that reminds me of my own culture, my own values." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I want to help your father. I want to give you the life you deserve. Carla, will you marry me?" The world stopped. Carla stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. A marriage proposal from a wealthy sheikh. A solution to every problem that had kept her awake for years. Her father's treatment. Her family's security. Everything she'd sacrificed for, handed to her in a single question. But underneath the shock, a small voice whispered warnings. "This is too fast. This doesn't make sense. Rich men don't marry their aunts' nurses." The voice sounded like her sister Jen, like her mother's cautious wisdom, like every instinct telling her something was wrong. But then Talal pulled out his phone and showed her a bank transfer. $50,000, already deposited to an account he'd set up in her name. "For your father's treatment," he said. "You can start the best therapy immediately. I've already contacted specialists in Manila." Carla looked at the number on the screen and felt every warning voice get drowned out by one overwhelming truth. Her father was dying, and this man was offering to save him. What choice did she really have? What choice had she ever really had? "Yes," she whispered, and Sheikh Talal Rumi smiled. The trap had been set. The victim had walked in willingly, and in 5 months, Carla would be dead in the desert, murdered for threatening to expose the nightmare hiding behind that smile. The wedding happened so fast that Carla barely had time to think, which was exactly the point. Within 2 weeks of accepting Talal's proposal, she found herself in a small ceremony at a friend's majlis in Jumeirah, surrounded by men she didn't know, reciting vows she barely understood. The imam performed the nikah in Arabic, his voice rising and falling in practiced rhythm, while Talal's friends served as witnesses. It felt official, felt real, felt like the beginning of something beautiful. She wore a simple white dress and held a bouquet of roses. Talal wore a traditional kandura and looked every bit the respectable sheikh. He gave her a mahr, a dowry, of 50,000 dirhams as Islamic tradition required. The ceremony lasted 20 minutes. Her entire future, signed away in less time than it took to watch a television show. But there was no marriage certificate, no official paperwork, no trip to the UAE courts to register their union. When Carla asked about it, Talal explained that Islamic marriages were valid on their own, that they'd handle the civil paperwork later, that these things took time in the UAE bureaucracy. She believed him because she wanted to believe him, because questioning him meant questioning the $50,000 already wired to her father's hospital account in Manila, because questioning him meant admitting she'd made a terrible mistake, and she couldn't afford terrible mistakes. Not when her father's cancer treatments were finally working. Not when her family was finally breathing easier. Not when the fairy tale was finally coming true. July 20th, 2022. Carla moved into what Talal called the family compound in Jumeirah, one of Dubai's most exclusive neighborhoods where villas cost millions and privacy was guaranteed by high walls and armed security. The compound consisted of 6 separate villas within the same gated property, each one a self-contained luxury residence with marble floors and designer furniture and views of perfectly manicured gardens. Carla was assigned to Villa 3, a 2-bedroom home that was bigger and more beautiful than any place she'd ever lived. She had her own kitchen, her own living room, her own bathroom with a bathtub big enough to swim in. For the first time in her life, she lived in luxury. For the first time in her life, she had everything she thought she wanted. Except her husband. Talal presented her with house rules on her first day. She was to stay in Villa 3 unless given permission to leave. He would visit on a schedule 2 or 3 times per week, when his business obligations and family responsibilities allowed. She was not to wander the compound or disturb the other residents. When she asked who else lived there, he was vague. Extended family, he said. We value privacy and respect for traditional structure. It seemed strange, but Carla told herself this was normal for wealthy Emirati families. Told herself she was lucky to have her own space. Told herself that love and marriage looked different in different cultures, and she needed to be patient, needed to adapt, needed to be grateful. The visits followed a pattern. Talal would arrive in the evening, have dinner with her, spend a few hours, then leave before midnight. He was charming during these visits, attentive and generous, bringing gifts and asking about her day. But he never invited her to meet his family in Abu Dhabi. Never took her out in public. Never posted about their marriage on social media or introduced her to friends. When she asked about it, he had ready explanations. His family was conservative and needed time to accept a Filipino wife. His business partners were traditional and wouldn't understand. His children were still adjusting to the idea. Everything required patience, required waiting, required Carla to stay invisible and grateful and quiet. The security cameras were everywhere. In the gardens, at the gates, in the common areas between villas. Carla noticed them but assumed they were normal for a wealthy compound. The guard at the main gate logged every entry and exit, requiring permission slips for residents to leave. Again, Carla assumed this was about security, about protecting valuable property and important people. She didn't realize she was a prisoner. Didn't realize the cameras were watching her. Didn't realize the guards were jailers. Didn't realize that Villa 3 was a cell dressed up as a palace. But 3 months into the marriage, doubt started creeping in. The isolation was suffocating. Carla had no friends in Dubai anymore because she'd left her job with Sheikh Emirati and lost touch with the nursing community. She couldn't attend Sunday Mass because Talal said it wasn't appropriate for his wife to be seen alone in public. Her work visa had been cancelled when she married, but no spousal visa had been issued. When she asked about it, Talal assured her it was being processed. These things took time, don't worry about paperwork. But Carla did worry. Worried that she was in the UAE illegally. Worried that she had no legal status. Worried that if something went wrong, she'd have no protection. She started calling her sister Jen more frequently, and Jen, working as a nursing supervisor in Abu Dhabi, noticed the change in Carla's voice. The forced cheerfulness. The vague answers. The way she'd deflect questions about her husband or her marriage or her daily life. Are you happy? Jen would ask directly. Of course, Carla would say. But her smile didn't reach her eyes through the video call. When can I visit you? Jen pressed. Soon, Carla promised. But soon never came because Talal said the timing wasn't right. The house wasn't ready. His family wouldn't approve. September 2022. Jen decided to see for herself what was happening with her sister. She took a day off work and drove from Abu Dhabi to Dubai without telling Carla she was coming. She knew the general area where Carla lived but not the exact address, so she spent hours driving around Jumeirah's wealthy neighborhoods, looking for gated compounds that matched Carla's vague descriptions. Finally, she spotted a complex that fit 6 villas behind high walls, security at the gate. She parked down the street and watched. And what Jen saw made her blood run cold. At 2 in the afternoon, she watched a Filipina woman, mid-30s, emerge from Villa 1 to hang laundry. At 3 o'clock, another Filipina woman came out of Villa 2 carrying groceries. At 4 o'clock, a third woman appeared on the balcony of Villa 4. All of them Filipino. All of them alone. All of them living in separate villas within the same compound. And Jen knew, with a sick certainty that made her hands shake, that her sister had walked into a trap. But she couldn't just burst in. Couldn't risk alerting whoever was running this operation. So Jen did what desperate sisters do. She befriended a delivery driver at a Filipino restaurant in Carla, explained she needed to surprise her sister with a gift, and convinced him to let her borrow his uniform and vehicle for one delivery. She created a fake order, called Villa 3 to confirm delivery, and at 5 o'clock on November 18, 2022, Jen rolled up to the compound gate in a delivery van. The guard checked her paperwork and called Villa 3. Carla answered, confused about an order she hadn't placed. But the guard was already waving the van through. Jen's heart pounded as she drove past Villa 1. Villa 2, seeing curtains move and faces peek out. These hidden women watching a delivery driver pass by their cages. She parked outside Villa 3 and knocked. When Carla opened the door and saw her sister standing there in a delivery uniform, her face went through a series of emotions so fast Jen could barely track them. Shock, confusion, fear, and finally something that looked almost like relief. 8, Carla whispered, using the Tagalog term for older sister. What are you doing here? Jen pushed past her into the villa and closed the door. We need to talk, she said. Right now. For 10 minutes, Carla tried to maintain the fiction. Everything was fine. She was happy. This was normal. But Jen was relentless, asking questions Carla couldn't answer. Why did she live alone if she was married? Why had Jen never met Talal? Why couldn't Carla leave the compound without permission? Why were there other Filipino women living in separate villas? At that last question, Carla went pale. What other women? She asked. Jen described what she'd seen. The woman in Villa 1. The woman in Villa 2. The woman in Villa 4. All Filipino. All alone. All living in this compound that was starting to look less like a family residence and more like a prison. I don't know who they are, Carla said weakly. Maybe relatives? Talal mentioned extended family. But her voice had no conviction, and Jen could see the truth dawning in her sister's eyes. The truth that something was very, very wrong. Let's go find out, Jen said, and before Carla could stop her, she opened the door and walked toward Villa 1. Rosa answered the door, 38 years old, tired eyes and careful hands, and when she saw 2 Filipino women standing on her doorstep, her expression crumbled. You're married to him too, aren't you? She said, and it wasn't really a question. Jen and Carla stood frozen. How many of us are there? Rosa continued, her voice breaking. I thought I was the only one. I've been here 3 years thinking I was his wife. She pulled out her phone and showed them a photo. Sheikh Talal Rumi in a kandura, standing next to Rosa in a white dress, and Imam visible in the background. A wedding photo from 2019. The world tilted. Carla grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. That's my husband, she whispered. Rosa laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. Mine too, she said. Or so I thought. Jen's detective mind was already working, putting pieces together, seeing the pattern emerge. How many villas are occupied in this compound? She asked. Rosa did the mental math. Villa 1, that's me. Villa 2, I've seen a woman there. Villa 4, there's someone. Villa 3, that's you. And I think Villa 5 just got a new resident last month. 5 villas. 5 women. 1 man. One by one, they knocked on doors. Linda from Villa 2, married Talal in 2020. Same story. Sick parent. Rushed ceremony. Isolated compound life. Maya from Villa 4, married in 2018. The longest suffering. The one who'd given up hope years ago. Grace from Villa 5, the newest bride, married just 6 weeks ago, still believing in the fairy tale the others had long since recognized as a nightmare. They gathered in Rosa's living room, 5 Filipino women staring at each other across a coffee table. each one holding a NICA certificate with the same man's name. Each one promised rescue and given a cage. The housemaid Priya, a Sri Lankan woman who maintained all the villas, found them there and decided to tell the truth she'd been carrying for years. "There have been others," she said quietly. "Before you. 8 women that I know of, maybe more. They come, they stay a year or two, then suddenly they're gone. He tells the staff they went home, but I've seen things, heard things. One woman, Marie, she disappeared in 2021. She was fighting with him, threatening to go to the police, and then she was just gone. The room went silent, disappeared. The word hung in the air like a threat." Jen pulled out her phone and started taking notes, her nursing supervisor brain switching into crisis management mode. "We need evidence," she said. "Photos, documents, messages, anything that proves the pattern." The women began sharing. Rosa had 3 years of text messages. Linda had recorded conversations. Maya had receipts and payment records. Carla had her NICA certificate and bank transfers. Together, they built a case against Sheikh Talal Rumi, a case that would either free them or destroy them. "We go to the police," Jen said. "All of you, together, file complaints simultaneously. We contact the Philippine embassy. We reach out to media. We make so much noise he can't silence all of you." The women looked at each other, fear and hope warring on their faces. "He's powerful," Maya warned. "He has connections, money. He could have us all deported." Jen looked at her sister. "Or you could do nothing and let him keep doing this to others. How many more Filipinas will he trap? How many more families will he destroy?" Carla thought about her father, finally healthy because of Talal's money. Thought about the risk of speaking out. Thought about Marie who disappeared. But then she thought about Grace, the newest victim, still believing the lies. Thought about all the women who might come after them. Thought about spending the rest of her life in this golden cage, grateful and silent and owned. "We fight," Carla said. "We tell the truth, whatever it costs." And in that moment sealed her own fate. Because men like Talal Rumi don't let their secrets walk away. They bury them in the desert and pretend they never existed at all. November 19th, 2022. The morning after 5 women discovered they'd all married the same man. Carla didn't sleep. She sat on her bed in Villa 3, staring at the NICA certificate that suddenly felt like a prison sentence instead of a promise. Every detail of the past 4 months replayed in her mind with new context, new meaning, new horror. The separate living quarters weren't about respecting tradition. The cameras weren't about security. The isolation wasn't about protecting his family's conservative values. Everything was control. Everything was calculation. Everything was a lie. Jen stayed the night, refusing to leave her sister alone, and at dawn they sat together on the balcony, watching the sun rise over Dubai's skyline. "You know what makes me angriest?" Carla said quietly. "I actually thought I was special. Thought he chose me because he saw something unique in me. But I was just another desperate nurse with a sick parent and a work visa. I was just a type, a category, a target." Jen squeezed her hand. "You are special. That's why you're going to be the one who stops him." The other women arrived one by one. Rosa brought coffee. Maya brought determination hardened by 3 years of captivity. Linda brought fear but also courage. Grace brought heartbreak, still processing that her 6-week marriage was a fraud. They sat in Carla's living room and planned their attack. "We need to be strategic," Jen said, pulling out her phone and opening a notes app. "We file complaints with multiple agencies simultaneously, so he can't pressure just one office to bury it. Philippine Embassy for diplomatic protection. Dubai Police for criminal investigation. The media for public pressure." "What if they don't believe us?" Grace asked, her voice small. "We have NICA certificates but no legal marriage registrations. What if they say we're just bitter mistresses?" Rosa shook her head. "We're not going to let them frame this that way. We have evidence. Bank transfers showing he paid us like employees while calling us wives. Text messages proving he kept us isolated. Testimony from Priya about the women who came before us. And most importantly, we have numbers. One woman claiming fraud they might dismiss. 7 women with identical stories? That's a pattern. That's a crime. They spent the day gathering evidence, printing documents, organizing timelines. Jen contacted a Filipino lawyer in Dubai who agreed to review their case confidentially. The lawyer's assessment was both encouraging and terrifying. You have grounds for fraud, human trafficking charges based on isolation and control, and potentially exploitation of foreign workers. But understand, this man has money and connections. He'll fight back hard. You need to be prepared for him to threaten you, to try to buy your silence, to use the legal system against you. Are you ready for that? Carla looked at the other women, saw in their faces the same thing she felt. Rage. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, determined kind that moves mountains. We're ready, she said, and she meant it. But ready and safe are not the same thing, and none of them truly understood what they were about to unleash. November 20th. They filed formal complaints at the Philippine embassy. Consul Maria met with all 7 women personally, her expression growing more horrified with each testimony. This is the most comprehensive case of exploitation I've encountered, she said. We will pursue this with everything we have. But I need to warn you, cases like this take time, and wealthy men have ways of making problems disappear. Please be careful. Stay together. Don't confront him alone. The warning was clear, but Carla was done being careful. Done being quiet. Done being grateful for scraps while being treated like property. That afternoon, they went to Dubai Police Headquarters in Dubai. Filed reports with the Criminal Investigation Department. The officer who took their statements was professional but cautious. These situations are complicated, he explained. Islamic marriages exist in a gray area legally, especially for foreign nationals. We'll investigate, but it will take time. Time they might not have. Carla could feel the clock ticking. Feel the window of opportunity closing. Feel the need to act before Talal realized what they were doing. She posted their story on Facebook that evening, using pseudonyms but including enough detail to make it clear. Posted it to Filipino community groups where thousands of overseas workers gathered to share information and warnings. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of shares within the first hour. Other women messaging to say similar things had happened to them. The network realizing this wasn't an isolated incident but a systemic problem. Wealthy men exploiting desperate women, knowing they had no legal recourse, no protection, no voice. Until now. Talal's lawyer sent letters the next morning, delivered to all 5 villas simultaneously. Accusations of defamation, extortion, fraud, threats of deportation proceedings and criminal charges against them. Demands for retraction and public apology within 48 hours. The women gathered in Rose's villa to read the letters together, and instead of fear, they felt validation. He's scared, Maya said with grim satisfaction. He wouldn't be threatening us if he wasn't scared. Jen agreed. Innocent men don't send lawyer letters. Guilty men trying to protect themselves do. But Carla wanted more than legal proceedings that might take months or years. Wanted more than paperwork and official complaints that could be buried by money and influence. She wanted confrontation. Wanted to look Talal in the eyes and hear him admit what he'd done. Wanted him to know that the women he'd treated as possessions had found their voices and were screaming. I'm going to meet with him, she announced. The room went silent. Carla, no, Jen said immediately. That's exactly what the consul warned against. It's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous, Carla replied. Staying silent was dangerous. Filing complaints is dangerous. Living in this compound under his control is dangerous. At least this way, I face the danger on my terms. She pulled out her phone and texted Talal before anyone could stop her. Need to see you urgently. About my father's treatment. Used the magic words she knew he'd respond to, the vulnerability he'd always exploited. The reply came within minutes. Tonight at 8 p.m. Your villa. Jen insisted on hiding in the bedroom with her phone ready to record. The other women wanted to be there too, but Carla refused. If he walks in and sees all of you, He'll know immediately it's an ambush. Let me do this. Trust me. So at 7:45 p.m. on November 21st, 2022, Carla prepared for the confrontation that would determine whether she lived or died. She didn't know that yet. Didn't know that in 72 hours her body would be found in the desert. Didn't know that this conversation would be the reason. All she knew was that she was done being a victim, done being silent, done letting him win. Talal arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, bringing a designer handbag as a gift, wearing the same charming smile he'd worn the day he proposed. "How is your father?" he asked, settling onto her couch like he owned it, like he owned her, like he owned everything in his perfect, controlled world. Carla served him coffee, played the role of dutiful wife one last time, then sat across from him and let the mask drop. "I met your other wives," she said quietly. The change in his face was instant. Shock, then calculation, then a flash of something dangerous before the charm slammed back into place. "I don't know what you're talking about." Carla pulled out her phone and showed him photos. Rosa from Villa 1, Linda from Villa 2, Maya from Villa 4, Grace from Villa 5. All married to you, all living in this compound, all believing the same lies you told me. Talal's jaw tightened. "This is a misunderstanding. They're not wives. They're family members I'm helping." Carla showed him the Nika certificates, all with his name, all performed by the same imam. "So you admit you tricked us? That these aren't real marriages?" He stood up, pacing, his composure cracking. "What do you want? Money? I'll give you money. I'll double what I promised for your father's treatment. Just stop whatever you're planning." "We're going to the police," Carla said, standing to face him. "All of us, together. We're filing complaints for fraud, human trafficking, exploitation. We're going to the media. We're going to make sure every Filipino in the UAE knows your name and face." Talal laughed, a harsh sound with no humor. "And say what? You have no proof of legal marriage. You'll be deported for making false accusations. You'll lose everything." Carla pulled out printed documents, bank transfers, text messages, testimony from Priya the housemaid, contact information for previous wives, timeline of his pattern over 8 years. "We have everything we need, and we're not afraid anymore." The laughter died. Talal's face went cold in a way Carla had never seen before, and for the first time, genuine fear flickered in her chest. "You don't know what you're doing," he said quietly. "You don't know who you're threatening. My uncle is a government minister. My business partners are powerful people. I can destroy you with a phone call." "Then we'll destroy you first," Carla replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Your reputation means everything to you. Your government contracts depend on being respectable. Your real wife in Abu Dhabi doesn't know about your collection of fake wives. We're holding a press conference at the embassy on Friday. Every reporter in Dubai will be there. Every news outlet will cover it. You'll be ruined." The silence that followed was heavy with threat. Talal stared at her, really seeing her for the first time not as a possession but as an enemy. Someone who could hurt him. Someone who had to be stopped. "If you do this," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "you will regret it. I promise you that." Carla lifted her chin. "Is that a threat?" Talal picked up his gift, the designer handbag, and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle and looked back at her. "It's a prediction," he said. Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click that sounded like a death sentence. Jen emerged from the bedroom, her phone showing a recording that captured everything. The sisters hugged, both shaking with adrenaline and fear and something that felt like victory. "We did it," Carla whispered. "We stood up to him." But in the security footage that police would review later, they could see Talal in his car in the parking area, making a phone call immediately after leaving Villa 3. Could see him sitting there for 20 minutes talking, planning, deciding. Could see the exact moment a nurse's threat became a death warrant. Could see the moment Sheikh Talal Rumi chose murder over exposure. 3 days later, Carla would be dead. But in that moment, standing in her living room with her sister's arms around her and evidence of Talal's crimes backed up on cloud servers, she felt invincible. Felt like justice was coming. felt like speaking truth to power was the bravest thing she'd ever done. She was right about that last part. It was brave. It was also deadly. And in 72 hours, the desert would claim her body while her voice would claim his freedom. A trade no one should ever have to make, but one that changed everything for every woman who came after. November 24, 2022, started like any normal day. Carla woke at 7, video called her father in Manila who looked better than he had in months. His cancer in remission thanks to treatments paid for with blood money she was about to expose. They talked about the weather, about her siblings, about everything except what she was planning to do in 48 hours. "I love you, Papa," she said at the end of the call. "I'm so proud of you," he replied. Neither of them knew it was goodbye. At 9 o'clock, she met with the other women in Rosa's villa to finalize their press conference plan. They decided to hold it at the Philippine Embassy on November 25th, just one day away, with international media invited. Jen had already contacted journalists from Gulf News, the Philippine Daily Inquirer, even reached out to CNN and Al Jazeera. This was going to be big. This was going to matter. This was going to end Talal's ability to hurt anyone ever again. They practiced their statements, reviewed their evidence packets, supported each other through waves of fear and determination. By 11 o'clock, they felt ready. Ready to change the world. Ready to get justice. Ready for anything except what was actually coming. At 2:15 p.m., Carla received a text from an unknown number. "This is Fatima. I was married to Talal in 2018. I have evidence that will destroy him. Can we meet? I'm scared to go to embassy. Can you come to Carrefour Mall parking lot in Alberta? I'll be in a white Nissan. Please come alone. I don't trust anyone else." Carla showed the message to Rosa, excitement building. Another victim coming forward, more evidence, more validation. This was perfect timing. Rosa offered to come with her, but Carla refused. She said she's scared. She specifically asked for me alone. It's a public parking lot in the middle of the day. "I'll be fine." Famous last words. Words that would haunt everyone who loved her. Words that sealed her fate. She grabbed her purse, told Rosa she'd be back in an hour, and walked out of Villa 3 into the bright Dubai afternoon. The security camera at the compound gate shows her leaving at 2:43 p.m., climbing into a taxi, looking confident and alive and completely unaware she had 3 hours left to live. The taxi driver would later tell police that he dropped her at Carrefour at 3:12 p.m., that she seemed happy, that she tipped him extra. Security footage from the mall shows Carla walking through the parking lot at 3:18 p.m., checking her phone, looking for a white Nissan that didn't exist. Shows her standing there, waiting, probably texting the unknown number asking where they were. At 3:22 p.m., a black Land Cruiser with heavily tinted windows pulls up next to her. Shows a brief conversation through the driver's window. Shows Carla hesitating, then opening the door and getting inside. At 3:23 p.m., the Land Cruiser drives away, and Carla disappears from every camera in Dubai. The last image of her alive is blurry but clear enough. Clear enough to see she's not scared yet, not worried yet, still believing in good intentions and helpful strangers and justice coming soon. What happened in that vehicle is something we know only from the driver's confession, given during 14 hours of police interrogation 3 days later. His name was Rashid, a 34-year-old Omani man who'd worked for Talal's construction company for 6 years, a personal driver for what Talal called sensitive matters, which apparently meant everything from picking up bribes to disposing of threats. Rashid would later testify that Talal called him into his office on November 23rd, the day after Carla's confrontation, and showed him her photograph. "This woman is threatening my family, my business, everything I've built," Talal told him. "She needs to disappear. Permanently. I'll pay you 50,000 dirhams. Half now, half when it's done." Rashid claimed he initially refused, but Talal threatened to report his expired visa, threatened deportation, threatened his family back in Oman. So Rashid agreed, took the money, and spent 24 hours planning a murder he'd never committed before. Created the fake phone number. Crafted the message about being a former wife with evidence. Chose a public location so Carla wouldn't be suspicious. borrowed the company Land Cruiser with the darkest tinted windows, planned his route to the desert where Talal's construction sites offered plenty of isolated locations to hide a body. When Carla got in the vehicle, Rashid told her that Fatima was meeting them at a construction site because she was too scared to meet in public, too afraid Talal had people watching the malls and the embassy. Carla believed him because she wanted to believe him, because she was high on adrenaline and purpose and the feeling of being close to victory. She texted Rosa at 3:25 p.m., heading to meet the witness. Be back soon. That message would be the last communication Carla ever sent. Her phone would ping cell towers heading east on Sheikh Zayed Road, then turning onto the Alabama-Ain Highway, then going dark forever at 4:12 p.m. somewhere in the desert between civilization and nowhere. The drive took about 40 minutes. Rashid would later describe how Carla started getting nervous around the 30-minute mark, asking why they were going so far, trying to call Rosa but getting no signal in the dead zone between cities. How she demanded he stop the car and let her out. How she tried to open the door while the vehicle was still moving. How she started screaming. He pulled over at the construction site, and Carla managed to get the door open and tumble out onto the sand. Started running, but there was nowhere to run to, just empty desert in every direction. Rashid grabbed a tire iron from the back of the Land Cruiser, caught up to her in seconds. I just wanted to knock her out, he told police. Just make her stop screaming. He swung the tire iron and connected with the back of her skull. Carla dropped to her knees, blood immediately soaking through her purple blouse. But she didn't lose consciousness. Started crawling away from him, leaving a trail in the sand, trying to survive. And Rashid panicked. Panicked because she was still moving, still making noise, still alive and able to identify him. So he hit her again. Harder. The second blow crushed her skull and killed her instantly at 4:47 p.m., based on the forensic analysis of her phone's last attempted connection to a cell tower. Rashid dragged her body 200 meters into the desert, dug a shallow grave with his hands and a shovel from the truck, covered her with sand and rocks and debris from the construction site, took her purse, her phone, her identification, destroyed the phone by smashing it with a rock and removing the SIM card, threw her jewelry in a dumpster on the drive back to Dubai, arrived at Talal's office at 7:30 p.m. to report that the job was done, and received the second payment of 25,000 dirhams in cash. Then went home and tried to sleep and couldn't, because it turns out murder weighs heavy even when you're paid well for it. Back in Jumeirah, Rosa started worrying at 6 o'clock when Carla still hadn't returned. Called her phone repeatedly, getting no answer. At 7 o'clock, she called Jen in a panic. Jen immediately drove from Abu Dhabi, arriving at the compound at 8:30 to find all the women gathered in Rosa's villa. Fear thick enough to taste. They called hospitals, called police, called every contact they had. At 10:30 p.m., they filed a missing person report at Al Bersha police station, explaining the context, the threats from Talal, the press conference scheduled for the next day. The officer took notes but explained they had to wait 24 hours before a formal investigation could begin. She's not missing, Jen insisted, her voice breaking. She's been taken. This is connected to our complaint against Sheikh Talal. Please, you have to look for her now. But policies are policies and 24 hours is 24 hours, and by the time the police started actually searching, Carla had been dead in the desert for over a day, her body temperature dropping through the cold November night, the sand already starting to reclaim her. November 25th, the day of the planned press conference, Jen stood at the Philippine embassy and announced to the gathered media that Carla was missing. Changed the narrative from triumph to tragedy, from exposing a predator to begging for help finding a victim. The video went viral. #FindCarla started trending in the Philippines. Pressure mounted on Dubai police to find her. And finally, they started moving with the urgency the situation deserved. Detective Inspector Saeed took over the case that afternoon, reviewed the security footage from Carrefour, enhanced the image of the Land Cruiser enough to get a partial plate number, cross-referenced with registered vehicles and found 23 possible matches. One of them was registered to Talal's construction company, assigned to his personal driver, Rashid. They located the vehicle in the company parking lot and brought Rashid in for questioning. He denied everything at first, claimed he was home with family on November 24th. But then Detective Saeed showed him the cell phone tower data. Showed him his phone pinging towers along the exact route to Al Ain. Showed him GPS data from the Land Cruiser placing it at a construction site in the desert for 43 minutes that afternoon. Showed him security camera footage from a highway that captured his license plate. Showed him the bank deposit of 25,000 dirhams that appeared in his account on November 23rd, wire transferred from Talal's personal account. Showed him that every piece of evidence pointed to murder, and his only choice was to cooperate or spend the rest of his life in prison for a crime a wealthy man had ordered him to commit. Rashid broke after 8 hours, confessed everything, drew a map to the construction site, described exactly where he'd buried the body. And at dawn on November 27th, police found Carla exactly where Rashid said she'd be. Her body curled in the sand like she was sleeping, her purple blouse still visible through the shallow grave, her dreams scattered across the desert floor. The medical examiner would later determine she'd died from blunt force trauma to the skull, that she'd fought back based on defensive wounds on her hands, that she'd been alive and conscious when the first blow landed, that she'd known she was dying, that her last moments were terror and pain and the bitter realization that speaking truth to power had cost her everything. November 28, 2022, 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun hadn't yet burned away the coolness of the desert night when a tactical police unit surrounded Sheikh Talal Rumi's villa in Al-Bursha. They came in force, 12 officers armed with warrants and body cameras and the weight of international pressure on their shoulders. Because by now, Carla's murder wasn't just a local crime. It was a diplomatic incident. The Philippine government was demanding justice. CNN was running hourly updates. Social media had turned Carla into a symbol of every migrant worker exploited and silenced by the powerful. The UAE couldn't make this disappear with money or influence. They had to be seen doing the right thing. Detective Saeed led the team through the compound gates, past the security guard who didn't resist because nobody had told him what to do when police actually came for the Sheikh. They found Talal in his master bedroom, still in silk pajamas, his legitimate wife Sheikha Mariam standing beside him in shock. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. Detective Saeed held up the warrant. "Sheikh Talal Rumi, you are under arrest for the murder of Carla, for human trafficking, for fraud. You have the right to remain silent." The look on Talal's face in that moment was almost worth everything that had led to it. Not fear, not yet, but disbelief. The disbelief of a man who'd operated with impunity for 8 years suddenly learning that consequences were real. His wife turned to him, confusion and horror dawning. "Murder? What is he talking about? What have you done?" But Talal said nothing, just held out his wrists for the handcuffs, his mind already calculating bail amounts and lawyer fees and ways to spin the story, still not understanding that some stories can't be spun when they're written in blood. The perp walk at 7:30 a.m. was captured by every camera in Dubai. The powerful Sheikh in handcuffs, being led to a police vehicle while journalists shouted questions and cameras flashed. The image went viral within minutes, shared across Filipino social media with captions like, "Justice for Carla," and "The powerful fall too." In Manila, Carla's father Roberto watched the news from his hospital bed and wept. In the compound in Jumeirah, the 5 surviving wives held each other and felt something they hadn't felt in years. Hope, fragile and sharp-edged, but hope nonetheless. Talal's first move was predictable. He lawyered up immediately, hiring the most expensive defense firm in Dubai, men who specialized in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. His strategy was simple: deny everything, claim the driver acted alone, paint himself as a victim of scheming women trying to extort money from a generous man who'd only wanted to help them. It might have worked if Rashid hadn't recorded their conversation. That audio file, recovered from the driver's phone during the investigation, was a gift from a paranoid man who'd suspected he might be set up to take the fall. Talal's voice, clear and undeniable, giving the order. "This woman is threatening everything I've built. She needs to disappear. Permanently. Can you handle that?" And Rashid's nervous response: "What exactly are you asking me to do?" And Talal's cold reply, "I'm asking you to make sure she can't talk anymore. I don't care how. Just make it permanent." The audio was played during Talal's bail hearing 2 days after his arrest, and the judge's face went from neutral to disgusted. Bail denied. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. But the investigation was just beginning, because once detectives started pulling threads, the entire tapestry of Talal's operation unraveled. Financial records showed payments to 18 different women over 8 years. Property records revealed he owned 3 other compounds similar to the Jumeirah one. Police raided them simultaneously on November 29th and found 2 more Filipino women, Josie and Tina, living in the Dubai Marina compound under the same conditions. Same fake marriages, same isolation, same lies. That brought the total to 7 current victims, and as police dug deeper, they found 11 more women who'd been in Talal's compounds between 2015 and 2020. The most disturbing discovery was in the Al Burshah secondary compound, long since vacated but still owned by Talal. In a locked file cabinet, police found what the prosecutor would later call a trophy collection. Files on each woman with copies of their passports, photos, NICA certificates, and handwritten notes in Talal's writing. Next to Marie's file, the woman who disappeared in 2020, he'd written "Problem resolved November 2020. Not returned to Philippines" or "Contract ended. Problem resolved." The phrase that launched a second murder investigation, though Marie's body was never found and that case remains open to this day. The international outrage was immediate and massive. In Manila, protesters gathered outside the UAE embassy demanding justice. President Marcos personally called the UAE ambassador. The Department of Foreign Affairs issued a travel advisory warning Filipinos about fraudulent marriage schemes in the Gulf. Human rights organizations descended on Dubai, demanding access to the victims, pushing for stronger worker protections. The UAE government, humiliated by the global attention, promised swift justice and systemic reforms. Promised this would never happen again. Promised what governments always promise when they're caught enabling the exploitation they'd ignored for years. For the 7 women, the attention was overwhelming and necessary in equal measure. They testified before investigators, repeated their stories until their voices went hoarse, relived their trauma for police reports and court documents and media interviews. Jen became their spokesperson because she was the only one with the strength and fury to face cameras without breaking down. "My sister died exposing this man," she told CNN in an interview that was viewed 12 million times. "She died because she refused to be silent. The best way to honor her is to make sure her death changes everything." The trial began on August 14, 2023, 9 months after Carla's murder. The Dubai courthouse was packed beyond capacity, with overflow crowds watching on screens outside. International journalists, human rights observers, representatives from the Philippine government, and hundreds of Filipino workers who'd taken the day off to witness justice. Talal arrived in prison clothes, visibly thinner, his arrogance replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Almost. The prosecution, led by Fatima Al-Zaruni, the UAE's first female murder prosecutor, built their case methodically and brutally. Day 1 was the murder itself. Forensic evidence. Rashid's testimony describing exactly how Talal ordered the killing and paid for it. The audio recording played in open court, Talal's voice filling the room with cold calculation. "Make sure she can't talk anymore." Carla's father, watching via video link from Manila, sobbed openly. The jury, 7 Emiratis carefully selected for impartiality, sat stone-faced. Days 2 through 4 focused on the pattern. The 18 women, the fake marriages, the systematic exploitation. Each victim testified, their stories so identical they could have been the same person experiencing the same nightmare on repeat. Rosa, who'd lost 3 years believing she was building a future. Maya, who'd given up hope but stayed because she had nowhere else to go. Grace, who'd been married just 6 weeks before learning the truth. And Jen, speaking for Carla, describing her sister's dreams and desperation, and the courage it took to confront a powerful man who had everything to lose. The prosecution's strategy was brilliant. They weren't just trying Talal for murder. They were trying him for a pattern of predatory behavior that made murder the inevitable conclusion. When you treat human beings as disposable objects, Prosecutor Al-Zaruni argued, when you trap them and exploit them and silence them, murder becomes just another form of disposal. Sheikh Talal didn't kill Carla because she threatened him personally. He killed her because she threatened to expose a system he'd built over 8 years. A system that treated desperate women as commodities. A system that couldn't survive the light of truth. The defense tried their best. Brought character witnesses who swore Talal was charitable and respected. Brought a cultural expert who explained that polygamy was legal in Islam, that these marriages were valid in religious terms. Tried to argue that the women knew what they were agreeing to, that they'd been compensated fairly, that this was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by women seeking bigger payouts. But every argument crumbled under cross-examination. If the marriages were legitimate, why weren't they registered? If the women were fairly compensated, why were they kept isolated and controlled? If Talal was innocent of murder, why did he pay a driver 50,000 dirhams the day after Carla threatened to expose him? On day 8, against his lawyer's advice, Talal took the stand. It was a disaster. He couldn't help himself, couldn't maintain the facade of remorse and regret his lawyers had coached him on. His arrogance bled through every answer. Yes, he'd married these women, but he was helping them, giving them opportunities they'd never have had otherwise. Yes, he'd kept the marriages secret, but that was to protect his family's reputation. Yes, he'd paid Rashid, but that was for legitimate business, not murder. He had no idea what the driver planned to do. The prosecutor destroyed him on cross-examination with 3 simple questions. Did Carla ask to be murdered? No answer. Did you tell Rashid to make sure she couldn't talk anymore? Silence. Do you feel any remorse for the fact that a 29-year-old woman is dead because she threatened to tell the truth about you? And Talal, unable to help himself, snapped. I feel remorse that a woman I tried to help betrayed my generosity. The courtroom erupted. The judge demanded order. And in that moment, everyone watching knew the verdict before the jury even deliberated. On August 30th, 2023, after 6 hours of deliberation, they returned with their decision. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of 7 counts of human trafficking. Guilty of 18 counts of fraud. Guilty of conspiracy and exploitation and every charge the prosecution had filed. Talal showed no emotion, but his hands shook as he gripped the defendant's table. In the gallery, Jen collapsed in her sister's arms, sobbing with relief and grief. Justice, finally. But justice that came too late to save the person who deserved it most. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Khalifa al-Mansouri, a veteran of 30 years, delivered a statement that would be quoted in law schools and human rights courses for years to come. You exploited desperate women in their darkest hours. You preyed on their love for their families. You trapped them in legal limbo, knowing they had no recourse. When one brave woman threatened to expose your crimes, you had her murdered and disposed of in the desert like garbage. You showed no remorse. You demonstrated no understanding that what you did was wrong. Even in this courtroom, you claimed to be the victim. Under UAE law, premeditated murder carries the death penalty. But I am not sentencing you to death. I am sentencing you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Death would end your suffering quickly. Instead, you will spend the rest of your life in a cell, knowing you've lost everything. Your freedom, your wealth, your reputation, your family. You will die slowly in prison, forgotten and despised. That is justice. The financial penalties were equally devastating. 50 million dirhams to Carla's family. 5 million to each of the 7 current wives. 2 million to each confirmed former wife. The total exceeded Talal's liquid assets, meaning his properties would be seized and sold. The family business empire collapsed within weeks. Government contracts were revoked. His legitimate wife filed for divorce, took custody of their 3 children, and moved to London to escape the scandal. His uncle, the government minister, resigned in disgrace. The family patriarch, Talal's 82-year-old father, died of a heart attack in December 2023, and many believed shame killed him as surely as any disease. But the real impact of the case went far beyond one man's punishment. The UAE government, embarrassed by international attention, created a special task force to investigate fraudulent marriages exploiting foreign workers, discovered 47 additional cases, made 12 arrests of Emirati nationals running similar schemes, passed emergency legislation requiring all marriages, including Islamic ceremonies, to be registered within 30 days, created protections preventing spousal visas from being cancelled without court approval, established a 24/7 hotline for migrant workers in 15 languages, built safe houses for those fleeing exploitation, allocated 100 million dirhams annually for worker legal defense. The reforms weren't perfect, but they were something. They were acknowledgement that the system had failed and needed to change. In the Philippines, the government implemented enhanced pre-departure training for overseas workers, teaching them to recognize warning signs of trafficking and exploitation. The embassy in Dubai doubled its staff and stationed permanent lawyers to handle cases, created rapid response protocols for missing workers, established repatriation funds for those needing to flee dangerous situations. Other countries followed. Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Nepal, India, Bangladesh all implemented similar protections. The UN Human Rights Council adopted what they called the Carla Protocol, recommendations for Gulf states on protecting domestic workers. Carla's death became a case study in law schools, social work programs, and human rights courses. Her name became a rallying cry for reform. She became more powerful in death than she'd ever been in life, which is both tragic and fitting. 2 years after Carla's murder, I traveled to Manila to meet her family and understand what remains when justice is served but the victim stays dead. Roberto had passed away in March 2024, his cancer returning with a vengeance 6 months after his daughter's murder. His wife Elena told me he never really recovered from learning that the money that saved his life had been the bait in a trap that killed his child. He felt so guilty, she said, sitting in the small concrete house where Carla grew up. He kept saying if he just died, she would still be alive. I told him that's not how love works, that's not how sacrifice works. But grief doesn't listen to logic. The 50 million dirhams in compensation, nearly $14 million, could have made the family wealthy by Philippine standards. Instead, Elena used most of it to establish the Carla Nursing Scholarship Fund at Cebu Doctors University, providing full rides to 10 nursing students annually. Money won't bring her back, Elena explained, but maybe it can help other girls achieve the dreams my daughter had. Maybe some good can come from this nightmare. The remaining money supports Carla's younger siblings, all of whom graduated from university and now work in advocacy, labor rights, and migrant worker protection. Our sister's legacy is our mission, her brother Miguel told me. She died fighting for justice. We're going to spend our lives continuing that fight. Jen became the full-time director of the Carla Foundation, the nonprofit she established in October 2023 using her compensation money from the Talal case. In 2 years, the foundation has assisted 347 overseas Filipino workers in legal battles, helped 89 escape dangerous situations, and trained 15,000 pre-departure workers on their rights. The foundation has a staff of 12, an annual budget of $2.3 million from donations and corporate partnerships, and a reputation as the most effective advocate for OFWs in the Middle East. Every case we win, every worker we help, that's my sister still fighting. Jen told me during an interview at the foundation's Manila office. Talal took her life, but he couldn't take her voice. If anything, he amplified it. The 7 wives scattered after the trial, each processing their trauma differently. Rosa returned to Cebu and opened a bakery that employs 15 people, using her baking skills learned during years of cooking in Villa 1. She's rebuilding her relationship with her children, though her eldest daughter, now 16, still struggles with resentment. She says I chose money over them, Rosa told me. And maybe she's right in some ways, but I thought I was choosing survival. I thought I was choosing their future. How do I explain to a teenager that desperation makes you do things you never thought you would? Therapy helps. Time helps. But some wounds heal slower than others. Linda went back to nursing and now works in Qatar, her compensation money invested in her siblings' education. She's single and says she'll probably never marry. Every time a man shows interest, I immediately wonder what he wants from me, what he's trying to take. I know that's not fair to good men, but trauma doesn't care about fairness. Maya works with Jen's foundation as an advocate, speaking at conferences globally about exploitation and survival. Carla's death gave my suffering meaning, she said. For 3 years I felt worthless, like I'd wasted my life in that villa. Now I know my experience can help others avoid the same trap. Grace completed a master's degree in social work and counsels trafficked women throughout the Middle East. She married a Filipino teacher and had a baby girl last year. Named her Carla. I want my daughter to grow up knowing the name of the woman who saved her mother, who died so I could escape. The 6th and 7th wives, Josie and Tina from the Dubai Marina compound, requested anonymity and returned to the Philippines to live quiet lives. Both used their compensation to pay off family debts but refuse interviews. Their silence is its own form of testimony, proof that surviving trauma doesn't always mean wanting to speak about it. Sheikh Talal Rumi is 53 years old now, imprisoned in Dubai Central Jail where he'll spend the rest of his life. He's kept in isolation for his own protection because other prisoners despise men who hurt women, especially men who hurt foreign workers. Guards report he spends 23 hours a day in his cell, refuses visits from anyone because his entire family disowned him, and maintains journals where he still insists he's the victim of a conspiracy. He writes that he was helping these women, that they betrayed his generosity, that the legal system was prejudiced against him because of international pressure. One guard told journalists. He genuinely believes he did nothing wrong. That's what scares me most. Not that he's evil, but that he doesn't even understand why what he did was evil. Rashid, the driver who actually murdered Carla, is serving 15 years in Oman after being transferred there in 2024. He's eligible for parole in 2030 and has written multiple letters to Carla's family expressing remorse, though none have been answered. I was weak, he wrote in one letter that Jen shared with me. I chose money over morality. I chose my own fear over another person's life. I deserve every year of this sentence and more. But I want the family to know that not a day goes by when I don't see her face, don't hear her screaming, don't wish I could go back and make a different choice. Jen crumpled that letter and threw it away. He wants forgiveness. I want my sister back. We don't always get what we want. Detective Saeed, who solved the case, was promoted to chief inspector and now heads the UAE's Human Trafficking Investigation Unit. He uses the Carla case in training programs, teaching younger officers to recognize patterns of exploitation and take seriously complaints from foreign workers. Before this case, I'll be honest, we didn't always prioritize these situations, he admitted during our interview. We saw disputes between employers and workers as civil matters, not criminal ones. Carla's murder changed how we look at power dynamics, isolation, control. Now we understand that what looks like a domestic arrangement can be a prison. That paperwork matters. That vulnerable people need protection, not dismissal. The media impact has been enormous. A Netflix documentary called The Sheikh's Wives, directed by Filipino filmmaker Berlante Mendoza, premiered in 2024 and was viewed 47 million times globally. It features interviews with 5 of the wives, with Jen, with investigators, showing the entire timeline from hope to betrayal to murder to justice. The documentary won Best Documentary at Sundance and sparked renewed conversations about migrant worker exploitation in the Gulf. Dozens of similar cases came to light after it aired, women finally feeling brave enough to come forward with their own stories of fake marriages and systematic abuse. There are memorials now. A park in Cebu City dedicated to Carla and all overseas Filipino workers who died abroad. A statue outside the Department of Foreign Affairs in Manila showing a nurse with angel wings. The inscription reading, "She spoke truth to power. She paid with her life. We will never forget." A website, carlalives.org, that collects stories from over 1,000 OFWs sharing their experiences and provides resources for workers facing exploitation, including a 24/7 crisis chat line. Her name has become synonymous with courage and justice in Filipino communities worldwide. But perhaps the most important question is whether anything has really changed. Have the reforms worked? Are foreign workers actually safer now? The answer is complicated. The UAE has made genuine efforts, the legislation is stronger, the enforcement is better, the diplomatic pressure remains high. But exploitation doesn't disappear with laws. It just gets quieter, harder to see, more careful about leaving evidence. There are still foreign workers trapped in abusive situations. Still employers who confiscate passports and withhold wages and use visa systems as weapons. Still women who marry men they barely know because desperation makes you trust promises that sound too good to be true. What has changed is awareness. Workers know their rights now. They know the warning signs. They know that organizations exist to help them, that embassies take complaints seriously, that speaking up might be dangerous but staying silent can be deadly. The conversation has shifted from blaming victims for their situation to questioning why systems allow exploitation to happen in the first place. That shift matters. That shift saves lives. I think about Carla often as I finish writing this story. Think about the choice she made on November 21, 2022, when she confronted Talal knowing it might cost her everything. She could have taken the bribe money he offered and disappeared quietly. Could have gone home to the Philippines with enough money to support her family for years. Could have stayed silent and safe and alive. But she didn't. She chose to fight, chose to speak, chose justice over safety, and it killed her. But here's what Talal never understood, what men like him never understand. You can't silence truth by silencing the person who speaks it. Carla's death didn't make the story go away. It made the story impossible to ignore. It turned a local scandal into an international incident. It forced systemic change that will protect thousands of women who come after her. She lost her life, but she won the war. And that's both heartbreaking and heroic in ways that make it hard to breathe. As I close this investigation, I want you to think about the people in your life who work as domestic helpers, nurses, caregivers, service workers. The ones who left their families and their countries to provide for the people they love. The ones who trust employers with their safety, their dignity, their lives. And ask yourself, how do we make sure no one else has to die to be heard? How do we create systems that protect the vulnerable instead of exploiting them? How do we ensure that speaking truth to power doesn't require martyrdom? If Carla's story moved you, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel so we can continue exposing injustice and demanding accountability. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Support organizations like the Carla Foundation that protect migrant workers. Speak up when you see exploitation, even in small ways, even when it's uncomfortable. Because the best way to honor Carla's memory is to continue her fight, to make noise, to refuse silence, to insist that every human being deserves dignity and safety and justice, regardless of their nationality or wealth or immigration status. Carla was 29 years old. She was a daughter, a sister, a skilled nurse, a woman with dreams. She wanted to save her father's life. She wanted to give her family security. She wanted to build a future. Instead, she became a symbol, a rallying cry, a catalyst for change that will echo long after her death. She spoke truth to power, and power struck back with fatal force. But in the end, the truth won. Her voice, amplified by her death, changed laws and saved lives and proved that even the powerful can fall when their secrets are exposed. Rest in power, Carla. Your legacy lives on in every woman who escapes exploitation, every worker who knows their rights, every person who refuses to stay silent in the face of injustice. You died for justice. We fight so your death wasn't in vain. Next week, we investigate the case of the Silicon Valley billionaire whose college roommate plotted for 3 years to murder his entire family. A story about friendship, betrayal, and how money destroys everything it touches. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay vigilant, stay safe, and remember that the people who serve us deserve our protection, not our exploitation. Justice for Carla. Justice for all of them.